Good evening and welcome to Kaufman Corner. With us, as always, the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, one of the co-founders of Baseball Prospectus. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. You can catch my radio show at 810WHB.com, 2 to 6 Central Time. We actually have a lot to get to, kind of, yes. No, not a pitching coach. Already people filling up the chat room asking about the pitching coach. No news. I don't know. I can't make up something when it comes to the pitching coach. Should
Well,
be
you
some.
could. You probably
Yeah,
shouldn't, though.
yeah. We won't. We won't. I guess
We're not that
we'll,
kind of show.
that's right. We won't do it. We are going to get to the re-signing of RyanO'Hearn. The Royals finishing off their 40-man roster. The downtown Ballpark District. It's a ballpark district. $2 billion ballpark district. We will talk a little bit about the top free agents that are out there. Rany, though. Let's start with RyanO'Hearn. Your guy, man. He's
My
back.
guy. So I think I probably should say thank you to JJ Piccolo because on an earlier podcast I very naively said that if the Royals stop making decisions that I disagree with, why are we here? What are we going to have to talk about on this show? So thank you, JJ, for reminding me that no matter what happens, the Royals will always make decisions that I disagree with because they will continue to make decisions that common sense disagrees with. This was a layup. This was not a difficult decision to make. RyanO'Hearn should not have been given a major league contract for next year. And my concern here, look, there were a lot of gnashing of teeth and yelling and screaming on Twitter when this came out. And in the grand scheme of things, bringing back RyanO'Hearn for presumably the 26th spot on the roster is not going to make or break the Royals as a franchise, or even the Royals in 2023. All right, he's getting $1.4 million, a modest raise. The major league minimum salary is, I think, $720,000. I think it's going up to $730,000 next year. So they're spending an additional $700,000 on a roster spot. The money, that's not insubstantial. They could hire a couple of really good coaches, as we've talked about, with that extra money. But $700,000 is not a huge impact on the Royals' finances. The roster spot on the 26-man roster spot, the 40-man roster spot, that has some value. If they hadn't brought him back, then maybe they could have protected one more player. Could they have protected TJ Sycamore on the 40-man roster? Yes, they probably could have. Or they'd have one more spot for a free agent in the future this winter. But, it's a bench spot. I don't, between Nick Pratto and Vinny Pasquantino, the Royals presumably have first base and DH mostly locked up. So it's not an issue of how much this affects the team. And I do want to make it clear as well, the one person I'm not upset about in all of this is RyanO'Hearn. All right, because he's taken some crap. It's become an annual tradition. I think he's taken it in good stride on his Twitter feed, where every November the Royals bring him back, fans go crazy, and this poor guy has to hear people yell and scream that he doesn't deserve to be a member of the Royals. And to RyanO'Hearn, I just want to say, you get your bag. Right? You all the power in the world to you. You got a 7-figure guaranteed for next year. Your major league careers don't last long. He got the money. Good for him. He seems like a good dude. I'm happy he got the money. My issue with this isn't RyanO'Hearn's taking up a roster spot. RyanO'Hearn's getting $1.4 million. My issue is the thought process that gets you to this point, because it's not that there's enormous downside here. It's that the upside isn't there. Because if you just go through the thought process of what happens if we don't bring him back, you realize the options that you have out there are just as good or better. You could, for one thing, if you let him go, the odds that he's getting a major league contract from some other organization, pretty low. There's a very good chance you would be able to re-sign him to a minor league contract with an invitation to spring training. And if he makes the major league roster, he can get the same amount of money, but it's not a guarantee. Whereas under the new CBA, my understanding is if an arbitration eligible player signs a contract like this, it is essentially guaranteed. So there's that. Nobody was going to give him a major league deal. You look at his track record. All right, his last year he had a 73 OPS plus. 73 OPS plus. That might have value if you're a great defensive shortstop. He's a first baseman / maybe left fielder. He has no defensive value. 73 OPS plus. You say, oh, that was a bad year. No, that was his best OPS plus since 2018. All right. 4 consecutive, you add up all the valuable players. This is where wins above replacement is a very useful feature to kind of gauge a player's overall value, his offense, his defense, his base running, everything in one number. It was negative 0.5 this past season, which was the best number he's had in 4 years. He's had 4 consecutive seasons with a below 0 wins above replacement. He is, by the numbers, worse than a replacement, quote unquote replacement, which means a generally available player in AAA would be expected to provide more value than RyanO'Hearn has 4 years in a row. All right, the bête noire of my existence as a Royals fan in the Dayton Moore era was, as you probably recall, Yuniesky Betancourt. Yuniesky Betancourt, as a Royal, was worth negative 2.4 wins above replacement in his Royals career. Sorry, negative 3.4 wins above replacement in his Royals career. RyanO'Hearn is now at negative 2.8. So he is dangerously close to approaching Yuniesky Betancourt territory, and he's going to get another chance, another crack at it. I just don't understand why. It's if you were desperate for a first baseman, but they're not. They have Nick Pratto and Vinny Pasquantino. Like every angle I can try to find an explanation for this move, and I can't find one. I can find half of one or a third of one, and that is last season as a pinch hitter, RyanO'Hearn hit 367. He was 11 for 30 as a pinch hitter in this past season. And if you believe that 30 plate appearances that you've sort of, teased out of his performance means that he is uniquely suited to that pinch hitting role, well, I have bad news for you. Because prior to this past season, he was 6 for 34 as a pinch hitter in his career. In 2021, he was 3 for 14 with a home run. Fair enough. In 2020, he was 0 for 9 as a pinch hitter. In 2019, 2 for 9, the double and a homer. Great. 2018, his rookie year, 1 for 2. Also hit a home run. But if you actually think he has this unique skill to be a great pinch hitter, why is it prior to 2022, his career batting average in pinch hitting situations was 176? So you're looking at such a small sample size that it doesn't mean anything. If you take a perfectly weighted coin, heads or tails, and flip it 1,000 times, but every time you flip it, you put it into a category of this flip is red, this flip is black. You split up those 1,000 trials and put them into a bunch of buckets. Inevitably, one of those buckets you're going to be heads 80% of the time or tails 80% of the time, and it's just noise. And that's what this is. His pinch hitting ability in 2022 was just noise, and I'm worried that the Royals looked at that and that was enough to justify bringing him back for another season. And now I'm exhausted.
How about this one? MM puts up here resigning. By the way, if you're catching us via the podcast, we stream live normally on a Sunday night at 10, but with the Chiefs playing on Sunday night, we're here on a Monday night at 10 p.m. Central. Normally on a Sunday night at 10 p.m. Central. You can be a part of the conversation in the chat room with Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. MM says, resigning O'Hearn makes me think that perhaps they may be trying to move Pratto while he still has some upside or value as a prospect. You put any weight on that?
Possibly. It certainly crossed my mind when they brought him back. It only makes sense in that, if they suddenly open up some playing time for him. But that's terrifying in its own right, because I don't think they should be opening up playing time for RyanO'Hearn, regardless of whether or not Nick Pratto is traded. I think a Nick Pratto trade is a high risk, high upside move. The problem I would have with it is simply that his value is down quite a bit from where it was a year ago. And I wish they had made that decision a year ago if they were going to do it. But if they've made that decision that he will never overcome his strikeout issues, but he still has value out there as a very good defender that somebody looks at and says, this guy might be able to hit 40 home runs, sure, trade him. But that still doesn't justify bringing back RyanO'Hearn.
Yeah, I think, listen, the banning of the shift, right? That has to be where the mindset is here for the Royals, because, and it's like I put up Matt's comment, it's the thought process. It's the decision making process that scares you. It's not the money. It's not even the roster spot. They're clearly still in a rebuild mode. So, but it's the mental approach to how they're doing things. It just makes no sense. And unless there are spray charts that say he's going to add 100 points of batting average and on base, because when we take the shift away, all these balls are going to end up. I would ask you this, and so that's the only way you can justify this to me, is because, like you said, the Royals have a logjam already at this spot. I would ask you this: would he not be the kind of guy you would be looking to grab if you were on another team? Right? If you're going to sign a guy to a non-guaranteed contract, isn't this the kind of guy you'd go get because of this hard hit rate? Aren't there some things that you'd say, okay, let's bring him in again? He's already here and he's already working with your guys, and they haven't unlocked this potential. But for another team, isn't this the kind of guy that you'd say, let's give this guy a shot and see if we can unlock the full potential, because there is a hard hit rate to his numbers that maybe we can make this guy something?
On a non-guaranteed minor league contract?
Right.
Sure. You take a flyer on him, but frankly, if I'm looking at guys who I look at a player that is just been the beneficiary of bad luck and is actually a better hitter than his numbers would suggest, RyanO'Hearn probably would not be on my radar at all. I mean, you mentioned the shift thing, and I think that's worth mentioning with literally every single player in baseball this winter. You have to consider the impact of the rule changes that are coming, because I think we're going to see. I mean, this is something we probably should talk about more often. We've talked about it, but probably should talk about it more often. Is the change in the rules of baseball between 2022 and 2023 are probably going to be as substantial as a rule change in any offseason since at least 1969, when in response to the year of the pitcher, they lowered the mound back, they redefined the strike zone. And you look at players from 1968 to 1969, and a bunch of hitters took a step forward. Some pitchers took a step back because they were adjusting to a very different game. So, every player this offseason, you have to keep that in mind, that, how do these rule changes impact his value? But to me, RyanO'Hearn, I don't see any sign that that banning the shift is going to benefit him any more than it will 100 other left-handed hitters, right? The left-handed hitter thing, left-handed hitters in general are going to are going to gain in value. Well, guess what? Nick Pratto and Vinny Pasquantino are both left-handed hitters. And the shift doesn't help you hit for more power. RyanO'Hearn hit 1 home run last year. Right? It doesn't improve your strikeout to walk ratio. He had a strikeout to walk ratio of 4-1, 4.5 to 1. His batting average on balls in play this past season was .313, which is the highest of his career. He has a career .268 BABIP. The major league average these days is like .280 to .290. Left-handed hitters, again, are somewhat affected by that. So his .270, .268 career BABIP, that might go up 10, 15 points. But last year, he was not hitting it a bad luck. Last year, he wasn't hitting for power, and he wasn't drawing walks, which are actually skills that he had shown earlier in his career. He's going to be 29 years old. I don't think that there's, a chance of sudden dramatic improvement. And I just think it's ironic, because the rumor has been reported that the Royals are one of the teams interested in it was Dominic Smith from the New York Mets. So I think the Mets non-tendered. And Dominic Smith, if you talk about a player who's coming off a bad season, Dominic Smith in 2022 had a 62 OPS plus. He had 194 and only 150 plate appearances. Very similar season, really, to O'Hearn. Kind of a disaster. Didn't know for any home runs. He's a first base left fielder type. But as recently as 2020, he had a 993 OPS. Like, he has a recent history of crushing. Was a better prospect in the minor leagues than RyanO'Hearn was, and is a year younger. And I don't know if he would sign for $1.4 million, but probably wouldn't be that much more. So, and I certainly don't see the point of having both of these guys. So I just think it's incredibly weird the Royals are rumored to have interest in a Dominic Smith when they just literally took the roster spot that Dominic Smith could have filled and gave it to an inferior player who happens to be on their team already.
Yeah, I just, it's overall just I don't. It is really kind of, and this is, Nick kind of put up here, and I think this is what a lot of people are saying. JJ drunkenly wastes money for easily replaceable players like Dayton did. We're doomed, and I think that's the frustration here. Is like, okay, you've got this breath of fresh air that's coming in. Okay, things are going to be different, and then all of a sudden you see the same thing happening, right? Like the same band. And this goes to um, the fact that we heard JJ say coming down the stretch, the guys you see here are largely going to be the guys you see next year. He's at least not lied to the fans. I mean, he pretty much
Even
telegraphed.
the one player that
Yeah,
we were eager to not see.
yeah, he has called his shot as to what he's going to do. But I mean, I think you are left. We now have to wait and see what they do in free agency to make you think that anything is going differently, because it's so frustrating as a Royals fan, and maybe it's just time, right? Give it some time, and we end up seeing that they, do move in a different direction with other players. And RyanO'Hearn along the way was kept and ultimately, discarded. And they said, okay, we've got him. Let's see what else happens. But it's hard to get excited. The one thing that I can say about this is, did you see RyanO'Hearn's Twitter?
Yeah. That was,
Yeah.
he has a good sense of humor about it, and I hope he proves us all wrong. I mean, like I said, he's the one guy in this who doesn't deserve to be blamed one bit. Like, good for him for realizing he has a good thing, and the Royals gave him a small raise, and he's like, yes, hell yes, I'll come back. He or his agent knows what his options are, and he knows that this is a good opportunity for him, and he probably won't get a better one out there.
And the Royals have to know, and we're going to talk about the downtown ballpark, but like Matt's reaction right here, this is why I wanted JJ fired too. Just replace it all. He didn't make moves in the minor league instruction either. I wanted a new regime 100%. And that's, there has to be, I'm not going to say that, the future of JJ Picola with the Royals organization rides on RyanO'Hearn, because I think that's oversimplifying things. And I think it's just not true. But to Matt's point, it almost, he needs to discover something and be good. Otherwise, this is the reaction you get. And they did just come out and say they want a $2 billion ballpark district is their plan.
Yeah, the juxtaposition of these two announcements on the same day was amusing, to say the least. Probably not the best timing in the world there. If they wanted to get the fans on board with one of the biggest announcements this century, for this organization.
And I know, and I think that's what's significant about it is this was more to me. I mean, I think we all knew this is the direction it was going. They announced over a year ago that they were going to, they wanted to be very transparent is the word that John Sherman continues to use in all things that are put out there about it, that they are looking and they didn't want to be sneaking around and have things leaking out. Hey, they're talking about this or that. They wanted to be clear. We're looking at downtown baseball. My takeaway from this, letter to the fans that John Sherman put out there is simply to close the door on Kauffman Stadium. That's really all that was done with that announcement, was to make it clear Kauffman Stadium will be no more. We are moving on, and that is not going to be our home. I think everything else is still a process that's in motion, and there's a lot of people that'll tell you that the Royals would like to have this thing done by 26. There is not a snowball's chance in hell that, when the World Cup comes to Kansas City, that this would be done. There is no chance that you can build a ballpark by itself, let alone an entire ballpark district in the span of what is now 3.5 years. But to me, the biggest part of this announcement is simply we're leaving Kauffman Stadium. That's what they basically said.
Yeah, no, I'd heard the same thing. Like, in an ideal world, the World Cup is coming in 2026. There's your kind of a soft deadline, and I don't know how you make the math work when it comes to construction. If the announcement that we saw last Monday was, we have signed a contract with the city municipal district. Here is the stadium plans. We are breaking ground tomorrow. even then it would be a tight squeeze. You could probably do it. But I mean, stadiums today are a lot more expensive than they were even 20, 30 years ago because they're bigger. There's also, yes, inflation and more profitable and all the luxury suites. But the point is, they are bigger projects. This is not something you can build. The original Kauffman Stadium was built in what, 2 years? If possibly there were the old days you could do a stadium project that quickly. I don't think there's any way, even after you break ground, you can do this in under 3 or 4 years. So I don't, unless they are going to get something approved in months. It just seems very, very just overly ambitious. So, but whether it's 2026 or 2030, I think it's probably less important than that the Royals will be playing in a new location, in an urban location, built into the city, in it, like you said, in a district that's walkable, that has mass transit. These are all the things that Kauffman Stadium does not currently have. And I think if that gets approved, the exact timing when the stadium opens is less important. So yeah, I mean, it's not a secret that John Sherman has wanted this, and really from the time he bought the team. And I don't think it's I certainly, as a somebody who's not a local and not going to have my property tax values increased as a result of this, somebody's not directly paying for it. I'm all on board with an urban ballpark that is part of a city. And that, specifically for baseball, where you're going to use it 81 times a year. This is not a football stadium that's going to be empty 90% of the time. It's going to be used, just from a baseball perspective, 20 to 25% of all the days during the year. There certainly are multiplier effects that can come into place in terms of the restaurants and other things around the stadium. Whether that is worth justifying the tax dollars that go into it, most economists will tell you no. There have been instances around the country where it has worked. There have also been instances where it's been a boondoggle. So, I think the biggest, probably the most important thing that was in that statement John Sherman released was, and I can't remember the precise wording, but this idea that no new tax dollars would be used, right? That the devil's in the details, but if they can pull it off without raising the levies that they're currently spending to fund the current stadium, I think that they won't have a huge amount of resistance with this. But that's the devil's in the details, and we'll have to wait to see exactly how much this is going to cost and how much taxes are going to be affected for the people.
Well, I think that's an important part of the conversation because, he said with no additional tax. Right. Well, there's a little bit of fudging there because that tax was set to run out. Right. It was
exactly that's the one thing that you can say, that a tax that was supposed to end the sales tax increase to fund the current stadium renovations at Arrowhead as well as Kauffman will no doubt continue. That's the opening bid. But of course, it's going to cost something. That if that's all it takes, I think it'll be a fairly easy sell for the fans. I would be surprised if you could build a new stadium with the same revenue stream that you used to renovate a stadium 20 years ago.
The only way that works, and I agree. I don't think that's going to get it there. I think this is just the opener. This is our plan, and then okay, when you talk about it, here's what is going to end up happening. Oh well, we're going to need some additional dollars, or there'll be a rental car tax. There'll be other things that are added on to pay for it, because the difference is theoretically this one could be for more years, right? When you renovated, you knew that it was Band-Aid, right? You knew. This was not like, oh, we renovate and then we're good for 50 years. You knew it was really a short-term solution, really, to keep the stadiums up to speed and generate the kind of revenue you wanted from them. This one theoretically can be a 40, 50-year, solution.
This is true.
That's what you hope. But, I think what is, and already there are a lot of people that are, firing out against it, and that the ballparks don't bring money to towns and so on and so forth. That debate will be had by many. I disagree. I think there's stature that comes with being a major league town and being an NFL town, and And having those things, I'm not one to sit and debate it. If you don't believe it, fine. I'm not going to waste time trying to convince you because you frankly probably cannot be convinced if that's the case. But I think the question is, does the Ballpark District, and if you looked at the renditions that they had as part of John Sherman's letter to the fans, it looks like office space. They want mixed use, probably condominiums, all of those kind of things that are there. If under control of the team, those are additional revenue sources. The question is this a real estate? Is this an ownership group that's getting rich off being real estate moguls? Or is that revenue going to be put back into the ball club? And I will say that this is where it's all going. I mean, this is what they're doing. And if you're stunned that the rich are looking to get richer, I mean, welcome to America. I mean, this is how it works. And, the Golden State Warriors have like all kinds of stuff around their arena. Like, this is how it works and how it's worked for a long time. The Boston Red Sox, if anyone's been to a Red Sox game, you present your ticket like a block away from Fenway Park. And everything around Fenway Park is Red Sox owned and generating revenue. That's what you want to believe, right? That this is going to be a revenue generator that allows the Royals to be in the free agent market.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the reception that ownership groups around the country have had to turning their baseball team or sports team, or sports franchise into basically the jewel of a real estate, complex, that the reception that they get from their fans, from the city, depends in large part on how successful that franchise is on the field, right? Ultimately, like you mentioned, the Golden State Warriors, I don't think a lot of people in the Bay Area are complaining that the Golden State Warriors are printing money because they've won 4 championships in the last 10 years or whatever, 7 years even. The Red Sox that have done this over a period of time in which they've won 4 championships this century. But here in Chicago, I can tell you the Ricketts family has done basically the exact same thing around Wrigley that they started doing right around the time they won a World Series. And when they won the World Series, there was no complaining. There's a lot of complaining now that ownership is only interested in the team as a vehicle for real estate profits because the Cubs are not spending money and they're not winning. And, a team that looked like really on the verge of a dynasty, if you go back 6 years and say, what team is going to be the best team of the next 6 years, you might have gotten a few people say the Astros and the Dodgers, but the Cubs absolutely would have been up there. And it didn't happen. And I think a lot of the frustration here in Chicago towards the ownership is really just a reflection of the team's success on the field more than whether or not they're making a lot of money around the ballpark. So this is just kind of another reminder for ownership that if you want to, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can, have a very profitable franchise and profitable real estate or other ancillary projects around the team and still maintain the support of the community if you win. And then also you win, and you can also have a winning team. But the point is, you have to win, and that doesn't mean investing in the team in terms of just payroll. It also means making a lot of smarter decisions. I mean, the Cubs, for a time, were spending money, but their farm system dried up. Then they stopped spending money. But the point is, if they had maintained a player development machine, they could have still won on the field, and people might not have minded the fact that they weren't spending quite as much money. So it all comes down to winning. You just remember, if you win, fans will put up with a lot. If you don't win, all of this project will not go down as well.
Yeah, and I did a poll this week, a Twitter poll. I think it was on last Monday, and I think it was 83% of the people wanted the downtown ballpark. Like it's not a tough sell to Royals fans. Obviously, sports fans are what listen to my sports talk show. So I'm swimming in the water of people that are willing to go out there. There's a lot of people that are going to say no, but overall, the idea of selling on downtown, there's no sale that needs to be done. So they've got
and that is not something you'll see all over the country. I mean, I want to make that clear. I mean, speaking as somebody who can sort of see the Kansas City area as an outsider, Kansas City, the level of civic pride is unusual for a major metropolitan area. It's one of the things I love about Kansas City the most. One of the things that Kansas Cityans take the most pride in themselves is the level of pride that they have in their community. And I think people are willing to spend that money, especially because this is moving the ballpark from the outskirts of town into the urban core. I actually think that's a big part of the sell. And from the moment that, they started dropping hints that this is where they wanted to go, I think the fans were on board because the city, putting a ballpark in the city is almost like the cherry on top of an urban renewal plan, is sort of sending a message to the world that Kansas City is on the rise. When you put it in the city, when you move a team to the suburbs, you're almost sending a message that it's time to get out of the city. I look at what the Braves have done and moved to Cobb County, and basically put their ballpark in the suburbs. Which they did because they got just an insane sweetheart deal from one of the suburbs. But I think that doesn't go over well with Atlanta as a metropolitan area, because these projects are supposed to be in a centrally accessible area. They're supposed to belong to the metropolitan community as a whole. And when you're picking sides and say we're going to put it in the north suburb, the west suburb, whatever suburb, you're almost implying that certain parts of town are more worthy than others. And I don't think that goes over well. So the fact that the Royals are talking about putting this in the heart of the city as part of a revitalization area, I think makes it an easier sell. And I think that they are fortunate, and they should realize that they are fortunate that they do have public support on their side right now. I think they just need to handle the logistics of this delicately. And, oh, by the way, maybe over the next, 12 to 18 months, put a winning team on the field, and it'll probably make it a lot easier to make this project go down.
Well, I like this one. Says, put it on the outside of downtown. This from Chiefs Hotline. Showcase the river and develop a whole new district. I think that's going to happen. That's actually where the current stadium is going. The NWSL team, I think, is going to be down by the river. And this one, Nick is asking, have I heard anything about location? Yes, I absolutely have. In fact, I would be stunned if it didn't end up on the east side of downtown. Now, I've heard one wedged in between the loop and what we would now consider downtown. There's parking areas and everything. And Todd Lebo went and pulled who owns what. A lot of the parking is owned by the city already, or the Dunn Corporation, of which you'll note that the Dunn family is part of the ownership group of the Kansas City Royals. Very convenient there. I've also heard take it on the other side of the loop. So in other words, if it's not on the east side of downtown, either within the loop or just outside the loop, I'll be shocked. I mean, when you see who owns the land, it's pretty easy to figure out how this is all coming together. And that this has always been, really, this was the plan when this ownership group was put together. And I'm not assuming the idea of options. I don't think, I don't really, I mean, I'm assuming there's still things that they need to work out to make sure that it all gets done the way they want. And so they don't want to just flat out say, this is where we're going. But I would be shocked if it isn't there on the east side of downtown.
Now, obviously, you know the city 1,000 times better than I do. Is that where you would put it? Does that seem like the right place for it? Do you think it can work there? What are the pros and cons there?
I think it works because there's open land. I mean, I think, the Star did a story where they showed kind of like 4 different locations, and all of them had one city block. And I said at that time, this is erroneous, because whoever builds this is going to want all the land around it, right? Like, it's this idea of a ballpark district is not new to me. I mean, I talked about it. I said, and I think you can say the same thing with the Chiefs. And so, does it work? Yes, it works because their vision of more than just a stadium can happen there. The other spots that they were talking about shoehorning it in was not going to work. I mean, the idea of 1922 and just putting it in one city block and it all fits nicely. No, that's not how it is. So, yeah, I think it works. I mean, I guess I don't really have this is what I want. 18th and Vine was talked about. There's certainly land down there that it can be done. I've been told that that is off the table. It is not at all in play. And I've been basically told that it's on the east side of downtown. That's where it's going. So that's another, the transparent side of things. I don't think that's really 100% transparent. They've got their location of where it's going to go, and I think it'll be there. And I think it works. I mean, I think they're trying to grow the overall footprint of downtown, and there's a lot going on. I mean, I was just downtown, went down to eat in the West Bottoms, and went through downtown. And I mean, I was just thinking about it. Like, I had real traffic on a Saturday night going downtown. I mean, there's a lot going on down there, and this would add to it. And so, yes, I think it would work.
Okay, and that's what you just described there. That it's already picking up, and
Yes.
that's what you want. I mean, that's the way it can work. I think of, I still look back at when they opened Jacobs Field, then Jacobs Field in Cleveland, in the early to mid '90s, and Cleveland, unfortunately, as a city, has been sort of in decline for decades, maybe generations now. But there was a period of time in the '90s where that was almost arrested. And I think Jacobs Field was sort of a big part of that area in Cleveland. They were already revitalizing it. They put the ballpark in there. The Indians got good at the perfect time. Like, that's the other thing, is they put this ballpark down. There was excitement about the ballpark. It opened in, I want to say, '94. It was a strike year, not a deal there. But the '94 Indians were a really exciting team. And then the '95 Indians were one of the best teams I've ever seen. 100 wins in a 144 game season. And they sold that ballpark out for like 8 or 9 years, every single day. I mean, they had the number on the on the billboard somewhere, some 550, 600 consecutive sellouts before they finally attendance started to wear down. And unfortunately, the urban decline of Cleveland has accelerated since then, and now their attendance is quite.
They also, to be clear, they had no Cleveland Browns at that time as well.
That's a good point. I guess they did have the Cavaliers. I mean, Kansas City being a two major sport town, I guess you can talk about sporting Kansas City now, maybe 3 out of 5, but not having a basketball or a hockey team, that has probably always helped the Royals a little bit. I kind of hesitate to imagine how bad attendance would have been for the Royals in their down years if they had like a competitive NBA team in town as well. But the point being is, like, that worked, and like it was a great addition. That ballpark was a great addition to that city. Whether it was worth the money, I don't know. I'm not an economist, but certainly from a civic pride standpoint, I think that was a success for a while, and that was in a very difficult environment for the city in terms of population and economics, which I don't think Kansas City has that issue. I think Kansas City, we've talked about this before, and just in comparison to the AL Central opponents in Cleveland and in Detroit, that the long-term future of Kansas City, speaking again as somebody from the outside, I don't see it as being a decline like some of these Rust Belt cities are. So if done right, I think this ballpark can be a huge success, if not a financial success from the taxpayer standpoint, certainly from a civic pride standpoint. And if it's going to happen, that was a nice quote up there. If it's going to happen, I want it to be done right. I want it to be done well, and I want there to be a winning team. But if the Royals put a contender out there at the time that this ballpark is opening, I think it could absolutely be a prime destination for the city, for the region, for many years to come.
I got this question from Vinny. Any chance of a retractable roof? I don't understand why you would build a ballpark, a stadium of any kind now without it, just for the fan convenience. I'm going to tell you, if it's raining, I'm not going, right? Like, but if it's raining and I'm indoors, I'll go. I've been told no shot of there being a retractable roof, that it will be, and even the rendering that was with the letter from John Sherman shows an open air stadium, and I'm actually being told that it's not happening on either stadium, which to me is a bigger deal on the football side of things, because the football side can get you Super Bowls, can get you Final Fours. I think it's very disappointing. I basically been told, unless there's a bidding war amongst locations and the amount of money keeps going up and up and up, that no, we're not going to see either one.
That's interesting. You say this as an appointment. To me, that's actually kind of heartening that they're not, and the reason for it is just the cost of a retractable roof. Like if money is no object and the ownership, like you said, can get anything they want from a municipality because there's a bidding war, sure, throw on a retractable roof. But the amount of money that adds to the project versus the increase in comfort, I just don't think is worth it. Like if you want to bring this in at a reasonable budget that isn't going to require massive new tax increases, etc., the easiest thing to do is to take the retractable roof off of the equation. I mean, it'd be nice.
Yes.
It's lovely, but if you want to do this responsibly and still create a world-class ballpark without an insane price tag, I actually think that this is a sign to me of fiscal responsibility that they're starting with that I kind of appreciate.
The amount of money that is in states and the counties and the cities is staggering and could easily be done. I disagree with that. I mean, I think it's just about what they think they can get past. Right. And
Well,
I think it would take effort.
that's part of it. I do think it's funny that the guy who won't see his taxes go up is like saying they shouldn't spend the money, and the guy who is going to see his taxes go up is like, give me the retractable roof. I want it diamond encrusted and gold plated.
Yeah. I'm actually not going to see my taxes go up because I'm on the Kansas side, unless Kansas gets into the bidding. And I think as of right now, like plan A is the Royals go to this location. They get their new ballpark open air. The Chiefs stay where they are. I think the Hunt family, I think Clark Hunt would prefer that they stay where they are. But I don't know that they will get what they want. Now, I will say this. The governor has already said whatever Kansas offers, it was the worst poker job ever. He and Frank White both billowing, I will match whatever it takes. Like
you mean politicians didn't prove to be wise negotiators, huh?
No,
that shocks me.
But I do think that Kansas, there are many developers on the Kansas side, and there are a number of locations on the Kansas side that could become a factor for the Chiefs. I think the Royals are going where they're going, and it's all set. Let's go to the free agent side of things. We want to get to we basically have stolen our buddy Keith Law, who does a fantastic job for the Athletic. He does great with the prospects in the minor leagues, and former front office, assistant general manager with the Toronto Blue Jays, has put out his top 50 prospects. And you and I agreed that we would pick one from 16 through 30. We're ruling out 1 through 15. So Carlos Correa, Trey Turner, Dansby Swanson, Aaron Judge, so on and so forth, off the boards. Xander
to be
Bogaerts.
Clear, you and I both are not saying that the Royals shouldn't sign a top 50 prospect. In fact, Dansby Swanson was your guy and Trey Turner is my guy. I think they could and frankly should, but will they? Probably not. So, but if we are both more than happy to be proven wrong.
Right. So then we go to the 16 through 30. We're going to take one out of there, and we're going to go to the 31 through 50. So we're going to go shopping for the Kansas City Royals. Where is your 16 through 30? Who have you landed on in Keith Law's rankings of 16 through 30? And I guess I can give the names so people want to know what we're choosing from. Josh Bell, Tyler Anderson, Kodai Senga, who is a right-handed pitcher from the Japanese Baseball League, Zach Eflin, Edwin Diaz, he's already signed, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Clayton Kershaw, Noah Syndergaard, Jose Quintana, Chris Bassett, Gary Sanchez, Mitch Haniger, Christian Vasquez, Ross Stripling, Michael Brantley, and Nathan Eovaldi. Where did you land out of this batch?
So first, before I go there, I just wanted to very briefly segue because we talked about how we meant to talk about how both World Series teams sort of like the lessons we could learn from building a franchise. And we talked all about the Astros and how important player development was, et cetera. Right. And we just kind of ran out of time to talk about the Phillies. And I think we should fold that in here because what the Phillies showed first off is that you don't have to be good in order to make the World Series. You have to be a 500 team that gets a little bit hot at the end. You get into the dance and you get hot. And I mean, it's sort of the 2014 Royals blueprint, but even more intense, right? They won, 86 games, 87 games? That was 86 games, made it to the World Series. But the thing about the Phillies that's important to know is they are not a good player development team, or they certainly have not been the last year. This team did not make it by, drafting well, by developing prospects in their farm system. They don't make the 500 without spending in free agency. And I just want to point out, at one point the Royals spent on what Alex Gordon's last contract. What was it, like 4 years, 72 million, something like that? I'm gonna look this up real fast.
Alex Gordon,
Yeah, Alex Gordon.
4
Yeah, he
years?
was 4 years. It was 4 years and 60, but he was making 20 million a year the last 2 years of his contract, his big contract. Then he came back for an extra year or two at a discount. But the point is, the Royals have paid Alex Gordon 20 million a year. They're paying Salvador Perez, what, 20, maybe 23 million? I want to see here. He's at the end of his contract, he's going to make that much. He'll make 20 million this coming year, the next 2 years, and 22 million in 2025. Okay, so the Royals have spent $20 million in a year on a player. This is my point. Imagine if the Royals, instead of spending 20 million a year on a good player, maybe towards the end of his run of effectiveness, but both Salvador Perez and Alex Gordon were getting paid the most amount of money at a time when they weren't at their peak of their powers. But imagine if you could have added on another, I don't know, let's say $7 million and gotten a clear future Hall of Famer in the prime of his career. Do you think the Royals could afford that? I mean, I know 20 million is, 27 million for a player sounds like a lot for the Royals, but they've already proven they can pay 20 million to a good player in his mid 30s. How about paying 27 million for a Hall of Fame player in his late 20s? Would you say the Royals could do that?
Are you talking about the move for Bryce Harper?
I'm talking about Bryce Harper. I just want to make the clear point. Like, when Bryce Harper was a free agent, did you hear anybody even suggesting the Royals could possibly afford Bryce Harper? No, you could. Bryce Harper, he's the premier free agent. Bryce Harper's making $27 million, 27 and a half, excuse me. And he signed as a 27-year-old free agent. And I mean, if I have to explain to you why Bryce Harper is a great player, then you're probably listening to the wrong podcast. I mean, he is, going to go to the Hall of Fame almost certainly. He is as feared a hitter as there is in the game. He's an exceptional track record in the postseason. Like, basically won the NLCS almost single-handedly. Like, he's a phenomenal player. He's making 27 million, and guess what? It's like a 13-year contract, but his salary does not go up during the contract. In fact, it goes down to 23 million the last 3 years of the contract. He has no opt-out. I hate opt-outs because it puts from a team perspective, because if the player sucks, you're stuck with him. I mean, Eric Hosmer gets surprised not opting out of his contract with the Red Sox. But if he's elite, then you lose him, right? So there's no opt-out. Bryce Harper is a Philly for 13 years, and he's vastly underpaid, and the Royals could have afforded him. So I just wanted to make that point, that the Phillies do not go to the playoffs without Bryce Harper. Without Bryce Harper and Zach Wheeler, who was, those two combined are each probably two of the 10 best free agent signings of this century. Zach Wheeler, they signed him. That's a guy that should be in the Royals wheelhouse. A mid-rotation guy who's around 30 years old, who has really good stuff, but has never really put it together. They signed him at the exact perfect moment. They brought him in, and he's been basically an ace ever since they signed him. Those are two exceptional free agent signings. That's how the Phillies got to the World Series. Without those guys, they are a 74 and 88 team, and nobody even looks at them. The point is, the Royals, in theory, could have signed either one of those guys, or even both of those guys. So I don't want to hear people say we can't afford guys. If you don't sign a free agent, it's a choice, and the Royals chose not to do it. Let's see if they can choose maybe to sign a guy who has maybe not Bryce Harper upside, but can make an impact in the future.
I would add to that simply that I think Bryce Harper's not signing with Kansas City the way they're currently constructed, right? Like that is this offseason. Yes, I believe they have the money, but I don't think, I don't think anyone who's that
it
kind
is
of player
possible.
is
Yes, it would be difficult. Right.
So,
Success breeds success. The problem isn't that the Royals can't afford it, it's that the Royals aren't good enough necessarily to attract somebody. Could the Royals, and after the 2015 season, signed a guy like that? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the market, with the payroll. It has to do with the perception of success. Guys want to play for a winner. So, maybe it's not this offseason, but certainly as we talk about moving into a new stadium potentially, and that adds a lot of prestige to the organization as well. That the Royals need to fulfill that promise and actually compete for an elite free agent from time to time.
And I read that whole list, and a couple people have commented here. Yes, Tyler Anderson has signed with the Angels, 3 years, $39 million, and Edwin Diaz 5 for $102 million back with the Mets. So a couple of those names are off the board. That was just the list. I was giving you the whole list. Aware
And
that
I'm also,
there are
we can also assume I'm crossing Clayton Kershaw off the list for I think obvious reason. I don't think Clayton Kershaw is leaving LA.
There goes my guy. No, I didn't have Clayton Kershaw.
I would love to have Clayton Kershaw, but for a variety, you talk about a guy who's not going to sign with the Royals. I don't think Clayton Kershaw is leaving the Los Angeles Dodgers after an incredible career there to join a team that lost 97 games. That just doesn't seem likely.
All right, so who do you got? 16 to 30.
So I look at this as I'm picking a 16 to 30 guy and I'm picking a 31 to 60 guy, or 31 to 50. I'm looking them as a package. So I've sort of split up my risk. So this isn't the sexiest pick, but I think it complements the other guy I would take pretty well, and that is Mitch Haniger from the Seattle Mariners. And we talk as much as we talk about the Royals need pitching desperately, and yes, they do need pitching desperately. There is at least a potential for that pitching help to come from within the farm system once they actually get some coaches that can take their crop of pitching prospects and turn them into major league pitchers, et cetera, et cetera. We've talked about that a lot. But quietly, outside of the pitching staff, the one of the biggest weaknesses, or certainly areas where they have the least amount of depth in the organization, is in the outfield. I mean, the starting outfield right now, you got Drew Waters, who I like, but is, a rookie with contact issues. You got Edward Olivares. You have Michael A. Taylor. Like there's nobody here that's really going to set the world on fire. I really like Tyler Gentry as a prospect, but he is a prospect. Mitch Haniger is coming off of a decent season. He missed a good chunk of the season with an ankle sprain, but he is a good hitter. Even this past season, he had a 114 OPS plus. He had a 122 OPS plus in 2021. He had 39 home runs for the Mariners that year. He'll be 32 years old. I don't think he's going to get a long-term deal. A 2-year contract is probably sufficient. He's a decent right fielder, but he can hit. He can hit, and he has secondary skills. He gets on base, and he hits for power. I think that's the Royals need somebody. Basically, they need the player they thought Hunter Dozier was. And speaking of guys who I'd love to see, not brought back. Speaking of a guy who's not going to be helped by this shift change, there's Hunter Dozier. So basically, if Hunter Dozier was the player the Royals thought he was when they signed him, this lineup would look completely different. And they need that guy to extend the lineup, a number 5, number 6 hitter with pop who can get on base. And I don't think it'll cost a lot of money, and it will allow them to sign a second free agent, which we'll talk about in a moment.
All right, I am going to go with one Nathan Eovaldi. My theory on where I'm going, and it's a theory that will continue into the next group as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking to resurrect a career, prove it type of guy that if he's nails, I'm trading him. So I'm not looking for somebody that's going to be, a Kansas City Royal for 5 years. If you got to sign him for 2 years, okay. But I think Eovaldi may be on a 1-year prove it type of deal and looking to get a multi-year deal on the other side. And so to me, good stuff. God knows I've chased him enough years with my fantasy baseball team and thinking it's all going to come together one time. It paid dividends for me. It has not, for the most part, paid dividends. But I think that's the kind of guy that you can get for a decent price that then you can flip into more prospects. So I'll take Nathan Eovaldi because I think he's the exact kind of high upside. And I'm counting on that a pitching coach is going to be hired and they're going to figure out how to pitch. And they're going to teach people how to pitch. And this is going to be a place that people want to come and pitch. That is what has to happen this offseason. And so I will bank on that happening, and then I will add Nathan Eovaldi to the pitching staff.
So my confession was I was going to try and cheat and make Nathan Eovaldi my second guy because he's at number 30. He's right on the cusp. He's definitely very high on my list. You look at, there's a lot of sort of these mid-rotation starters on this list that Keith has put together. If you just look from 15 on, like you mentioned, Tyler Anderson, and you've got Kyle Gibson's on this list, Zach Eflin, Noah Syndergaard, who I actually like a lot. But he lost 3 miles an hour on his fastball coming back from Tommy John surgery. If I thought there was a chance that velocity could come back, he would be very high on my list. And that's a guy kind of an Eovaldi type where there's still upside there for a guy that isn't going to necessarily warrant a 4-year deal. There's enough risk there that you can probably get him on a 2 or 3 year contract at the most. But the upside is there. You could actually have like a number 2 starter if things go well. You've got Chris Bassett, you got Ross Stripling, there are a bunch of guys like that. So yeah, of them, Eovaldi's the one I think the combination of upside and floor, because he's turned into in the last 3-4 years, when he takes the mound, he's a league average guy. He's not a bad pitcher. His issue has been staying healthy, which is true for a lot of pitchers. So if I have to stay in the 30 to 50 range, then the second guy would be a guy who is his teammate in Boston this past year, and that's Michael Wacha, who is another guy who I think he's only like 30 years old. Yeah, he'll be 31 this coming season. Coming off of he's coming off a really good ERA, 3.32, but his FIP was higher at 4.14. The year before he had a much higher ERA, but a similar FIP. He's a league average starter. Again, probably a guy you can get on a 2-year deal. I don't think it's going to take a long. Exactly, Matt's making the point. The Royals can afford 2 or 3 of these guys. That's sort of the point. Like if they're only going to sign one free agent, we can maybe hunt a little bit higher up this list. Maybe they go after a Jameson Taillon. That's the guy who was number 10 on this list. If the Royals want to go after that guy, it's going to cost more money, and then they just go bottom fishing after that. That's fine too. But if they want to sign 2 free agents, I think they have the money to go out and get an outfielder and a starter. And keep in mind also, I'm assuming the Royals are probably going to bring back Zach Greinke in some capacity, which is one reason why I would not look at Corey Kluber, because Corey Kluber has basically turned into a Zach Greinke kind of pitcher. He's a very great command and control guy, but his fastball velocity now, he's a complete finesse guy. His average fastball was like 89 this year. And to have him and Greinke in your rotation would be, I think, too much of the same thing. But Michael Wacha, I think, can actually be a league average guy with some upside that he could be in a good year at number 2 and won't cost you a ton of money.
Where are you going? So you go Michael Wacha. I looked long and hard at Joey Gallo.
Okay.
I would love the idea that the Royals have the Midas touch when it comes to hitting, and they can unlock the power. I think he's got as much power as anybody in baseball. They need power. They've got to hit the ball over the fence. But he's now the only. Are you aware of this? He's the only player with 100 career home runs and a batting average below 200. Because he drove his batting average down to 199 this year, and so for right now, he fits that bill. So I looked long and hard at Joey Gallo, and I think that would be an excellent place if you believe you can. If you sit down with your hitting people and you look at the video and you go, "Here's the problem," and we can fix it, then you bring him in, right?
I think if you can, great, but man, teams have tried. Like Joey Gallo, the power is there, but so are the strikeouts. And if they could do that, if they had that ability, they would have done it with Nick Pratto, I think, already. And the fact that they weren't able to. Agreed. But there's another guy on this list that I'd like that could fit the Joey Gallo role even better.
Well, so hang on. So I passed on Joey Gallo. Mm-hmm. I took the long, hard look at Joey Gallo, and I ended up signing Andrew Heaney, who is another one of my fantasy baseball teases that I have chased for years. And last year, 72 innings and 14 starts, he struck out 110. And he is tantalizingly electric when he's on. And left-hander, big-time stuff, blow guys away, just can't stay on the mound. But to me, that's the type of upside guy you go for if you're talking about like 1-year deals. He's another guy that I think might be on a 1-year prove-it type of deal. But I would even be willing to go several years on him because I think the stuff is electric. And I think if he loses a little bit of his stuff, when you're striking out, what was his Ks per 9? 13.6 Ks per 9. You can lose a little something and still be effective. So I went with Andrew Heaney for my second one.
I think in terms of upside, like you said, he's probably got more upside than some of these other guys. My concern with him is simply that what you just said, 110 strikeouts in 72 innings, a 3.10 ERA, that happened after he joined the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Mhm.
Like, I'm terrified of taking a guy from like an organization that develops pitching well. Because the year before, when he was with the Angels and the Yankees actually are pretty good with when it comes to pitcher development. The Angels maybe not so much. He had a 5.83 ERA, and I just worry if you take him out of LA without whatever it is that LA does special coming with him, will he be able to maintain that? But again, so much that's why we are sitting here talking about free agents. But you and I would both be liking to talk about right now is the Royals' new pitching coach.
Right.
And I'm hoping we'll have a name there soon, because I think that's where this starts. We need to have that process in place first and bring in the free agents later. The one other name on this list I do want to mention, because you mentioned the Joey Gallo, and the guy I really was tempted, and frankly, you might be able to get. You could sign these other two guys, and you'd still have the money to sign this guy. That's Michael Conforto, and Michael Conforto, I mean, made a bad decision last year. I think he's a Scott Boras client. He declined the qualifying offer from the Mets that would have guaranteed him something like $17.9 million and went into free agency and then hurt his shoulder, I believe, training in the offseason, missed the entire year, missed an entire paycheck, for the entire season. But Michael Conforto, I loved him in New York. He's I'm trying to think of a good comp. It's a little an overbid to call him a Jim Edmonds type, but like a poor man's Jim Edmonds in the terms of guy who might hit 270, but like with so many walks and so much power that he's an offensive force. He doesn't have Jim Edmonds' defense. That's where the comparison breaks down. But he is a good corner outfielder. He can't play center, but he's a good corner outfielder who hits bombs, walks a ton, doesn't strike out a ton. Was a really good player, and even after missing a season, he'll be 30 years old. And you might be able to get him on a 1-year deal, maybe 1 year with an option. I just feel like the downside. The downside here is still better than RyanO'Hearn to bring everything back full circle. Instead of the 1.4 million to give RyanO'Hearn, you could have thrown that at Michael Conforto, because the upside here is, a guy's a force in the middle of your lineup, a huge trade chip if you're not in the playoff hunt come July. And I would love to see if they want to take a gamble on somebody. I mean, the last time the Royals did something like that would probably be Kendrys Morales. It was a different kind of player, but a guy who very similar, declined a qualifying offer and then couldn't get a contract until June. Played the season, but was terrible because he basically missed all of spring training. And the Royals give him a 2-year deal, and it looked like an overpay, and it actually worked out beautifully, that he could still hit. And I think Michael Conforto, if he's healthy, can still hit. And I would love to see the Royals take a chance on him.
Well, there it is. That's our reasonable wish list, right? We did it within reason. We didn't just go grab the biggest names out there.
That's right. We didn't ask for a retractable roof. We kept the budget under control.
Yes, absolutely.
We practiced fiscal restraint.
Very well done. Very well done. All right, that's going to do it. Remember, if you're catching us via the podcast, we stream live Sunday nights normally at 10 o'clock. No Sunday night football for the Chiefs next week, so we'll be back on Sunday night at 10 p.m. Central Time. Of course, hit that like button, the love button. Make sure you subscribe. It doesn't cost you nothing, but it does a lot of good for us. We appreciate it. Of course, we appreciate our sponsor, GAN Asphalt and Concrete, everything you need for parking. If you've got a business and you got a parking lot, whether it's just putting the stripes on it for where the parking is or building the whole thing, go to GAN Asphalt and Concrete. You can find them online at ganasphalt.com. For the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, my name is Soren Petro. Thank you very much for joining us here on Kaufman Corner.